Hello, this is Locomochi, our wholesome puzzle game where you drive a toy locomotive. And this is our second devlog, where things are finally starting to come together and our levels are taking shape. Hi, my name is Jon, and if you watch our last devlog, you know we were covering the transition phase from our MVP to our vertical slice. Last time I focused on a lot of things, not only on development, but this time I'm going to focus more on that. So let's begin! Jose has been working on turning into proper systems all the prototypes I showed in the previous devlog. In short, he makes sure all my spaghetti code never makes it into the final game, otherwise it will probably explode. This includes barriers, buttons, pressure platforms, and signals, which connects all of them. On top of that, the moving platforms and the rotation platforms, which are considered complex buildings. To give some context, in our GTD I try to keep everything as modular as possible. That's why, to control these new movement buildings, we design a new type of control platform that transfers the locomotive input movement to whatever structure it is coupled with. The asset for this system is already done, but we haven't had the time to properly implement it yet. One of the reasons for this delay is that before we wanted to test the interactive light shader that Sergio has been developing, and now we have it already integrated, and it looks really cool. On top of that, Uri has also been reworking the locomotive itself. We still need to implement it into the new build, but don't worry, we will be sharing updates on that really soon. Another huge step forward has been the implementation of cinematics and characters into the actual gameplay flow. Previously, characters were mostly placeholders or static elements, but now they are starting to interact properly with the player through timeline sequences, although we still lack all the in-game events. We are still designing a lot of characters and interactions. Please look at these cool concepts that Sergio has already done. But the pipeline is finally in place, which also connects me directly with another major system that we've been developing, which is the quest system. The most visible part of this is the prototype of the quest display that we have already implemented, where players can check the status of the level progression and the optional objectives. But the most important part of this is that now we have a scalable system that will allow us for further develop other features, such as beacons, the coin system that we will use for customization and the hub progression, and the level strategy. With all these new features properly developed, it was finally my turn to put it all together into the levels that I already prototyped. And dude, let me tell you, it was much more work than I expected. Part of the challenge was that this process also converged with the implementation of the feedback from our internal playtests, so I had to redesign part of the levels, tutorials iconography, and overall pacing of the onboarding experience. One thing we now have very clear is that we will eventually need to automate many parts of the workflow with proper tools, especially regarding cinematics implementation. But for now, this is not a major concern, since we do not plan to add new levels until we finish the vertical slice. The good news is that now we have an onboarding experience that we believe guides much better the player through the new mechanics and system of the game. To achieve this, we define what we call the pillars of communication for our game. First of all, the tutorial signs. These show the players the control inputs and interactions. They are now localized depending on the device that the player is using, which makes the tutorials much clearer and more intuitive. Secondly, instruction beacons. Right now this is still a prototype, but the idea is to help inexperienced players with concise guidance using something similar to an instruction manual. The inspiration comes from the toy instruction booklets included in some model train kits and Legos. Another one related with instructions, because it uses text as well, will be the walkietalkies, which basically provides short-term goals and contextual guidance whenever the player needs additional help. And finally, the third pillar, the characters themselves. Characters communicate through emoji-based dialogue and visual storytelling. They mostly speak about their requests, react to the world, and tell small funny stories. To make all of this work without relying on text, we are heavily using cinematics and camera movements, to naturally guide the player's attention and reinforce the communication of gameplay situations. Although for now, cinematics are just the bare minimum to be understandable. Our goal is to polish them once our next playtest finishes. Speaking about that, to test all this, we are now preparing for a new private playtest using Steam for the first time. To achieve this, Sergi has worked on creating the DevOps architecture for deploying our game and testing builds during production. Maybe it sounds funny, but it is one of those things that made me feel more like a professional studio than just some friends developing a game. This playtest will mainly focus on benchmarking the new tutorials and the onboarding flow, to see if mechanics are understandable, where players get stuck, how many people interact with quests, and if the pacing feels natural. If you want to get invited to our playtest, don't hesitate to subscribe to our newsletter, where we can send you all the information when we are doing one. I don't want to finish this devlog without speaking about the hidden part of developing a game. Of course, we also spend quite some time fixing bugs. The game is becoming increasingly complex in terms of system, mechanics, and overall architecture, so taking time to stabilize everything is extremely important, otherwise you eventually reach a point where builds simply become unplayable. Meanwhile, Carla has been working on a brand new trailer for the game, which we hope we can share with you very soon. We have also been investing some time into business and production documentation. Sadly, it could be considered under NDA, so I cannot speak a lot about it, but it's something that we are being aware of. Our next step is to continue the environment blocking and start the hub prototyping. We want to begin connecting all the levels into a more cohesive world and better define the overall flow of the experience. We will also continue improving the visual presentation with more VFX work and overall polish across the game. One thing we especially want to focus on is developing the grass system, so the environments feels even more toy-like and handcrafted. Finally, we are starting to define the final UI UX systems, including the time driver ID, coins, and progression feedback, so all the different systems of the game will feel connected and consistent. And that's all for today's devlog. In my opinion, it is finally starting to feel more like a cohesive experience rather than just a prototype like it was in the MVP, that it felt really like a tiny game. Now it's something more serious and premium. Thank you so much for following the project and supporting us during development. It really means a lot to us. And if you want to continue helping the project grow, don't forget to wishlist the game and share it with people who love cozy games, trains, and wholesome experiences. See you in the next devlog!